Since the earliest flicker of firelight, when human voices first rose into the night, there have been stories, long before ink touched parchment, before symbols were carved into clay or stone. There were words spoken softly, drifting through the air like sparks, weaving meaning into the dark. Myths were born in this way, not as fictions, not as mere tales to pass idle hours, but as living companions to existence. They explained the mysteries of the world, gave shape to the unseen, offered comfort in the face of the vast unknown. Around the flames, eyes glowing in the night, humanity spoke of gods and spirits, of the sky and the earth, of beginnings and endings, and those words carried forward, never dying, only reshaped, retold, reborn in countless generations. Imagine, if you will, the quiet plains of Mesopotamia, more than 4,000 years ago. The rivers Euphrates and Tigris wind through the fertile soil, giving life to the world's first great cities, and in those cities, myths took form. There was the story of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, a man part divine, part mortal, who sought immortality, but learned instead the fragile beauty of life. The tale was etched into clay tablets, written in cuneiform, but it was older still, carried by voice long before it hardened into wedge-shaped script. The Epic of Gilgamesh spoke of friendship, of loss, of the search for meaning, themes that echo even now in modern hearts, for they are not bound by time. The myth did not die. It changed, flowing into later stories of heroes who strive against impossible odds, who seek eternity but find wisdom in mortality. Beside Gilgamesh were the gods of Sumer and Akkad, of Babylon and Assyria. Inanna, queen of heaven, who descended into the underworld and rose again. Her journey mirrored later in other lands by goddesses who die and return, symbols of fertility, of the cycles of life and death. Marduk, who fought the chaos dragon Tiamat and carved the world from her body, a myth of order triumphing over chaos, repeated in countless forms, from Zeus against Typhon to Saint Michael against the dragon. In these myths we hear the first whispers of stories that never fade, that return again and again, because they speak to something eternal within us. Move now to the banks of the Nile, where another ancient civilization blossomed. Egypt's myths shimmer with sunlight and shadow, with the endless rhythm of the river that gave life to the land. There was Ra, the sun god, who sailed his boat across the sky by day, only to descend into the underworld at night, fighting serpents of chaos before rising once more. Each dawn was his victory, each sunrise a renewal of order. There was Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood, who gathered the broken pieces of her husband Osiris after he was slain by Set, breathing life into him once more. From this union came Horus, the falcon-headed god, who avenged his father and ruled as king. The cycle of death and rebirth, of loss and restoration, of cosmic struggle and renewal, unfolded in these myths, soothing human fear with patterns of meaning. The Egyptians looked to the stars and saw stories there, too. Orion was Osiris, eternally reborn, and Sirius, the bright star of Isis, heralded the flooding of the Nile. To gaze at the heavens was to read myth itself, written in light. And so, as centuries passed, their myths lived on, not only in temples and tombs, but in the imagination of later civilizations who carried forward these patterns of rebirth and cosmic struggle. From Mesopotamia and Egypt, let us move gently northward, where the Greeks began to shape myths that still whisper through the modern world. Their stories were filled with gods who quarreled, loved, and fought, reflecting human passions magnified into divine forms. Zeus with his thunderbolts, Athena with her wisdom, Aphrodite with her beauty, Hades with his shadowed realm. Each myth was a mirror, showing both the grandeur and frailty of human life. The tale of Persephone stolen into the underworld, her return marking the change of seasons, echoes the descent of Inanna before her, and echoes still in countless myths of cycles, of departure and return. The labors of Heracles, the trials of Odysseus, the tragedy of Oedipus, all spoke of endurance, of fate, of the search for meaning in a world both beautiful and cruel. What makes these myths eternal is not only their survival in text, but their survival in essence. They are retold in plays and poems, in novels and films, in countless retellings that shift the names and settings but keep the bones of the story alive. The hero's journey, the descent into shadow and the return to light, the struggle against chaos, the quest for wisdom, these are the threads that weave through every civilization, every time. Travel now to the far north, where long winters and endless nights gave rise to myths carved in ice and stone, carried in the sagas of the Norse. Here we meet Odin, the Allfather who hung himself upon the world tree, sacrificing himself to gain the wisdom of runes. We hear of Thor, strong and steadfast, battling giants to preserve the world of gods and men. We learn of Loki, trickster and shapeshifter, weaving mischief that brings both ruin and transformation. And at the end of all things lies Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when fire and ice consumed the world, only for it to be reborn again, green and new. Even in their bleakness, the Norse myths hold renewal, reminding us that endings are also beginnings. Far across the oceans, myths blossomed in other lands. In India, the stories of gods and heroes were sung in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, epics so vast they contain countless lives, countless lessons, Rama's devotion, Arjuna's doubts, Krishna's divine counsel. These myths did not fade, for they became woven into daily life, into ritual, art, and tradition, enduring not as relics but as living presence. In China, myths of the Jade Emperor, of dragons who governed rivers, of Nuwa, who repaired the sky, carried forward visions of balance, of harmony, of cosmic order. In Japan, the sun goddess Amaterasu, hiding in her cave until lured out with laughter and song, brought light back to the world, another echo of eternal return, another rhythm of loss and renewal. The myths of the Americas, too, lived with eternal strength. Among the Maya, the Popol Vuh told of the hero twins who descended into the underworld, played ball games with the lords of death, and rose again, a cycle of death and rebirth written into the very movements of the sun and planets. Among the Navajo, the world was shaped through a journey upward from one realm to the next, guided by holy people, weaving stories of harmony, of balance with earth and sky. Each tale carried both explanation and comfort, showing that human life was part of a grander story, never alone, never meaningless. Africa, vast and varied, held myths as eternal as the desert and the forest. Anansi, the spider, spun webs of trickery and wisdom, teaching through laughter and mischief. The Dogon of Mali told of Namo, the first beings, whose stories reached even to the stars. In countless traditions across the continent, creation myths spoke of sky and earth separating, of humans given life by divine breath, of ancestors who walk close to the living, reminding them always of continuity. In all these myths, from the earliest tablets to the songs still sung today, one theme remains: myths never truly die. They may change shape, they may take on new names, they may be forgotten in detail, but their essence remains, carried forward like a flame through darkness. They endure because they are more than stories. They are reflections of what it means to be human, to love, to fear, to hope, to seek meaning in a vast and mysterious world. As you listen now, let the stories drift around you like echoes across time. Imagine the firelight of the first storytellers, the temples of Egypt, the amphitheaters of Greece, the mead halls of the Norse, the monasteries of India, the mountains of China, the deserts of Africa, the forests of the Americas. In every place, in every time, myths rose, whispered, endured. They are still with us, in our books, in our films, in our dreams. They are eternal companions, myths that never died. And as you rest, let that knowledge comfort you. The stories will continue. They will be told again, in new voices, in new forms, as long as there are hearts to wonder and ears to listen. Myths never die, for they live within us. The world of myth opens like a vast tapestry, each thread glimmering with its own color, yet woven into patterns that repeat, reappear, and reflect one another across centuries and continents. To continue walking through this timeless realm is to feel how deeply the stories of different civilizations are connected, not by chance alone, but by the shared questions of humanity. Who are we? Where did we come from? What lies beyond? In the lands of ancient Greece, the myths grew like wild vines, filling every corner of imagination, shaping art, theater, and philosophy. The Greeks gave their gods human forms and human emotions, magnified to divine intensity. They quarreled and loved, they schemed and suffered, they blessed and punished, always mirroring human life. To sit under the open sky of Greece and hear these myths was to enter a world where the boundary between mortal and divine was thin, where a god might walk in the marketplace or whisper in a dream. One of the most enduring of these myths is that of Prometheus, the titan who defied Zeus by stealing fire from the heavens to give to humankind. Fire, the light of knowledge, the spark of progress, was a gift that lifted humanity from darkness. Yet Prometheus paid the price, chained to a rock where an eagle devoured his liver each day, only for it to grow back by night. This story of sacrifice for knowledge has never truly faded. It reappears in countless forms, in the scientist who risks condemnation to share discoveries, in the artist who gives their soul to light the imagination of others. Prometheus still lives wherever courage burns against tyranny, wherever knowledge is sought despite danger. Another myth, deeply tender, is that of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the greatest musician, descended into the underworld to bring back his beloved, his music softening even the heart of Hades. He was granted her return, on one condition, that he not look back until they had both reached the world of the living. But his love and doubt overcame him, and he turned too soon, losing her forever. This story of love, loss, and the fragility of hope lingers still, retold in operas, novels, films, and poems. Its message is gentle and eternal. Love seeks the impossible, yet life asks us to accept what slips beyond reach. And then there is Perseus, the slayer of Medusa, whose mirrored shield reflected the deadly gaze, allowing him to triumph. There is Theseus, who entered the labyrinth with a thread, finding his way back from the monstrous Minotaur. There is the tale of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, his waxen wings melting as he fell into the sea. These myths speak of daring, of ingenuity, of caution against pride, lessons that do not belong only to Greece, but to all who live and dream. At the heart of Greek myth lies the story of the gods themselves. Born from chaos, Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, brought forth titans, who in turn gave way to the Olympians. Zeus, who overthrew Cronus, established order on Olympus, surrounded by his divine kin. The struggles between generations of gods mirror those of human families, of inheritance and change, and always there is fate, stronger even than Zeus himself, reminding all that destiny weaves beyond the will of any one being. The Greeks saw in myth a mirror of themselves, of a world both luminous and fragile, filled with beauty and sorrow alike. If we turn now eastward, we find ourselves in the vast land of India, where myths did not merely describe the world but became the world, woven into every aspect of life. The Mahabharata, one of the greatest epics ever told, stretches across hundreds of thousands of verses. At its center is the story of a war between families, yet within it are countless other stories, each shining with meaning. In one moment, a hero faces the battlefield, trembling with doubt, unwilling to fight his kin. And there, upon his chariot, the god Krishna reveals the Bhagavad Gita, a dialogue of duty, devotion, and the eternal soul. With calm wisdom, Krishna reminds Arjuna that the soul does not die, that duty must be fulfilled, that life and death are but stages of a greater journey. For centuries, this teaching has soothed countless hearts, offering peace in the face of fear and loss. In the Ramayana, the story of Rama unfolds: a prince exiled, his wife Sita taken by the demon king Ravana, his journey to rescue her aided by Hanuman, the monkey god of devotion and strength. Rama is not only a hero, he is the embodiment of virtue, of dharma, of the path of righteousness. His story is not confined to India alone, but lives across Southeast Asia, in temples, in performances, in festivals. In every telling, it teaches of love, duty, loyalty, and the triumph of good over evil. Hindu mythology is vast, with gods and goddesses countless in form and nature. Vishnu, the preserver, takes avatars across ages as fish, as tortoise, as man-lion, as Krishna, as Rama, to restore balance when chaos rises. Shiva, the destroyer and renewer, dances the cosmic dance, the Tandava, in which worlds are dissolved and reborn. Devi, the goddess in her many forms, Parvati, Durga, Kali, embodies strength, compassion, and fierce protection. These myths do not end. They live in worship, in ritual, in story, in song. They are eternal companions of those who listen and believe, shaping life with their presence. As we travel northward again, the Norse myths greet us with their solemn, rugged beauty. They are stories carved in frost and fire, filled with both might and melancholy. The world tree, Yggdrasil, stands at the center, its roots and branches connecting all realms: Asgard of the gods, Midgard of humans, Jotunheim of giants, Hell of the dead, and others, each linked by this living axis of existence. To imagine Yggdrasil is to imagine the universe as one living being. holding together all worlds, fragile yet enduring. Odin, the one-eyed god, seeks wisdom at any cost. He gives up his eye for knowledge of the well. He hangs upon the tree for 9 nights to gain the runes. He wanders the world disguised as a traveler, always searching. His hunger for wisdom is not distant from us. It is the human longing to know, to see beyond the veil, to grasp the mysteries that lie hidden. Thor, his son, wields Mjolnir, his hammer, with thunderous strength, protecting gods and humans alike from the giants who threaten them. His is a story of courage, of steadfast defense, of the endless struggle against overwhelming odds. Loki, ever shifting, brings both laughter and ruin, reminding us that mischief is part of creation, that destruction and transformation are entwined, and always. At the edge of these myths is Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. The wolf Fenrir breaks free, devouring Odin. The serpent Jormungandr rises from the sea, spewing venom across the sky. Fire and ice consume the world. Yet after the great destruction, a new world emerges, green and renewed, where survivors walk again under the sun. Even in their vision of the end, the Norse gave hope of rebirth, of cycles beyond endings. In this, they join the eternal rhythm found in myths everywhere, that death is never final, that from endings come beginnings. Crossing now to China, myths unfold with quiet grace, like brushstrokes across silk. Here, the Jade Emperor rules the heavens, organizing the cosmos with order and balance. The dragons, symbols of power and rain, coil through rivers and skies, their presence both majestic and protective. One of the most tender myths is that of Nua, the goddess who shaped humanity from clay. When the sky cracked and chaos threatened, she melted stones of 5 colors to mend the heavens, restoring harmony. Her story is one of creation and care, of the divine as healer and protector. The Chinese zodiac itself is born of myth. The tale tells of a great race organized by the Jade Emperor, in which animals crossed a river to determine their order in the cycle. The rat, clever and quick, rode upon the ox's back and leapt ahead at the last moment, becoming the first. The cat, tricked by the rat, missed the race entirely, explaining why cats still chase rats. Each animal became a marker of time, weaving myth into the very rhythm of years, into the identity of those born beneath each sign. In Japan, the sun goddess Amaterasu shines as the heart of myth. When she hid herself in a cave after quarreling with her brother Susanoo, the world fell into darkness. The gods gathered outside, dancing and laughing, until curiosity drew her forth, and light returned. This gentle tale speaks of the power of community, of joy, of bringing back light through shared celebration. Many other myths weave through Japan, of dragons, of spirits, of the kami who dwell in rivers, trees, and mountains. Shinto myths remind us that the world is alive, that divinity resides not only in distant heavens, but in every rock and stream. Across these civilizations, the patterns of myth shimmer with familiarity. A hero descends into darkness and returns. A goddess dies and is reborn. Chaos rises, and order is restored. A trickster brings both trouble and transformation. A flood cleanses the world, leaving survivors to begin anew. These are not isolated stories but echoes of a shared human imagination. They endure because they speak to us still, because they are us. That as you rest now, imagine these myths not as separate tales but as rivers flowing into one great sea. They begin in distant mountains, in cultures apart, but they meet and mingle, carrying with them the same essence of wonder, of meaning, of reflection. To listen to these stories is to listen to the voice of humanity across time. And as your eyes grow heavy, let that voice lull you, calm, eternal, carrying myths that never died. Far from the lands of Greece and India, beyond the icy mountains of the Norse, across vast oceans and endless skies, other myths were spoken, just as eternal, just as filled with wonder. The Americas, with their mountains and jungles, deserts and plains, carried stories that rose like smoke into the stars. These were myths that explained not only the world, but the very movements of sun and moon, the beating of hearts, the cycle of life and death. Among the Maya, whose stone cities rose from the green canopy of the rainforest, the Popol Vuh preserved the stories of creation. It tells of the first attempts by the gods to make humans. From mud they shaped figures, but they crumbled, dissolving in the rain. From wood they carved beings, who spoke but had no soul, no heart. They were destroyed in a flood, their remnants becoming the monkeys of the forests. Only when humans were formed from maize, the sacred corn, did creation succeed. In this myth, food itself became sacred, for to eat maize was to partake of divine essence. To live as beings meant to carry both spirit and breath. The Popol Vuh also tells of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Zebu, who descended into Xibalba, the underworld, to challenge the lords of death. They faced trials and games, playing the sacred ball game against death itself. They were killed, yet reborn, their victory ensuring that life and death would always dance together, that the cycles of day and night, of seed and harvest, would continue. In this story, one hears echoes of other lands of Inanna descending to the underworld, of Orpheus, of countless heroes who face darkness and rise again. The Mayan myth is unique, yet part of a shared eternal rhythm. Further north, among the peoples of the Great Plains, the Lakota spoke of White Buffalo Calf Woman, a sacred figure who brought them the sacred pipe, teaching rituals that bound the people to the Great Spirit. She promised that as long as they kept the pipe, they would remain connected to the divine. Her story is one of guidance and hope, a reminder that divinity walks close, bringing gifts of meaning and ritual. To this day, the sight of a white buffalo is considered sacred, a living echo of her promise. The Navajo tell of the emergence of the world. Humanity began, not in this world, but in lower worlds, moving upward through trials, guided by the holy people, until at last they emerged into the present world of beauty. This emergence story is gentle and vast, showing life as a journey through layers of reality, always moving closer to harmony. For the Navajo, harmony, or HCH, is the essence of existence, balance with the earth, the sky, the community, and oneself. Their myths are not only stories, but living practices, shaping how life is lived each day. In the forests and coasts of the Pacific Northwest, the raven appears again and again. Raven is trickster, creator, teacher, thief, and giver. In one story, Raven steals the sun from a great chief, bringing light to the world. In another, he scatters stars across the sky. Raven's cunning and mischief may cause trouble, but they also bring transformation, reminding us that creation often comes through unexpected paths. The raven echoes Loki in the Norse lands, Anansi in Africa, Coyote among native peoples, the eternal trickster who brings change. Let us now move across the great Atlantic, to Africa, where myths carry the warmth of the sun, the strength of the earth, and the rhythm of drum and dance. In West Africa, the spider Anansi weaves his tales, sometimes clever, sometimes foolish, always playful. Anansi teaches through laughter. One tale tells how Anansi tricked the sky god into giving him all the world's stories, which he then shared with humanity. In this way, he became the bringer of narrative, the source of myth itself. Each Anansi story is light-hearted, yet profound, showing that wisdom often hides in play, that humor can carry truth. In ancient Egypt, we have already seen myths of gods and rebirth, yet across the vastness of Africa, countless other myths flourished. Among the Yoruba of Nigeria, the Orishas embodied divine forces. Shango, god of thunder, hurls lightning with power. Ocean, goddess of rivers, brings beauty, love, and fertility. Each Orisha is both a divine figure and a living presence, honored in ritual, in song, in dance. These myths did not remain only in Africa, but traveled with those taken in bondage, living on in the Americas through traditions like Santeria and Candomblé, showing again that myths never die but adapt, endure, and transform. Among the Dogon of Mali, myths tell of Namo, primordial beings sent by the creator beings of water who brought order to chaos. Their stories reached to the stars, for the Dogon spoke of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, in ways that astonished later scholars. For them, the cosmos itself was alive with meaning, shaped by myth, carried in story. Africa's myths remind us that the world is always alive in animals, in rivers, in ancestors who walk close beside the living. They are gentle reminders that humanity is never alone. That spirit flows through all creation. Now let us turn to Oceania, where islands rise from the endless sea, and myths sail across the waters with the people who carried them. In Polynesia, the figure of Māui appears in many forms, a demigod, a trickster, a hero. He is said to have fished the islands from the sea. Using a great hook, he slowed the sun to make the days longer, giving people more time to live and work. His deeds are both playful and mighty, showing how myth can explain not only nature but human longing itself. The people of these islands carried Maui's stories across vast distances, guiding their voyages by stars, by waves, by memory. The myths traveled with them, as eternal as the ocean. Among the Mbori of New Zealand, myths tell of Ranjanui, the Sky Father, and Papa, the Earth Mother, locked in a close embrace. Their children trapped between. The children pushed them apart, creating the world of light. Yet even separated, the sky still weeps for the earth, his tears falling as rain, while the earth's sighs rise as mist. This tender story explains the beauty of nature through love and longing, showing again that myths are not harsh explanations, but soft songs of meaning. Now, let us walk into the misty lands of the Celts, where myths carried the rhythm of forests, rivers, and stone circles. In Ireland, the Tuatha Dé Danann, a race of divine beings, arrived from across the sea, bringing magic, knowledge, and skill. They battled the Fomorians, beings of chaos, ensuring balance in the land. Even when defeated by later invaders, the Tuatha Dé Danann did not vanish. Instead, they retreated into the hills, becoming the Sidith, the fair folk, the hidden ones. In this way, myth explained the unseen, the whispers of wind, the lights in the hills, the mysteries of nature. The Celts told stories of heroes, too, like Tulane, who, as a boy, defended Ulster with superhuman strength, whose rage could transform him into a fearsome figure, yet whose heart held loyalty and love. They spoke of the other world, a realm of beauty and danger, where time flowed differently, where mortals might wander and return changed. These myths remind us that the boundary between worlds is thin, that wonder lies always close at hand. Across Wales and Britain, the figure of Arthur emerged, shaped by Celtic myth, woven with medieval romance. Arthur, the once and future king, surrounded by knights, guided by Merlin, seeking the Holy Grail. Though history may blur the truth, the myth endures of a leader who will return in times of need, of justice and unity that never dies. This myth, like so many, is a promise of renewal, of return. As we move gently through these lands, we feel the same patterns arise again. A creator shapes the world from love or struggle. Heroes face trials, often descending into shadow and rising anew. Tricksters stir mischief, reminding us of life's playfulness. Gods and spirits walk close beside mortals, guiding, teaching, transforming. Myths of Africa, the Americas, Oceania, and the Celtic lands differ in voice, in color, in rhythm, yet they echo the same eternal themes. They show us that humanity, in every place and every time, seeks meaning through story, and those stories do not fade. They are carried in ritual, in song, in memory. They are told again at firesides, in books, on screens. They change, yet they endure. They are myths that never died. So as you rest, let these stories drift through your imagination like waves across a shore, like wind through trees, like stars across the night sky. The myths of the world surround you, gentle and eternal, carrying the voices of countless generations. You are part of this great story, listening as others listened, remembering as others remembered, and the myths will continue, always, as long as hearts wonder and voices speak. In the lands of the rising rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates shaped the first great cities, myths were written on clay tablets, pressed into soft earth by careful hands. Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, was also the cradle of myth. Here, people asked the same questions all humans ask. Where do we come from? Why do we live? What happens when life ends? The answers were woven into stories that lived for thousands of years, stories that never truly faded, even as empires rose and fell. One of the oldest stories is the Epic of Gilgamesh. This tale, carved into clay in cuneiform script, speaks of a king who was part god and part man, yet fully mortal in his fears. Gilgamesh, strong and proud, sought fame through deeds. He fought monsters, built mighty walls, and befriended Enkidu, a wild man shaped by the gods. Their friendship was deep and transformative, softening Gilgamesh's heart. But when Enkidu died, Gilgamesh was overcome by grief. He wandered the world, searching for immortality, seeking to escape death. In his journey, he found Utnapishtim, survivor of the Great Flood, who told him how the gods once destroyed humanity, but spared a single family by guiding them to build a great boat. This story, so similar to the later tale of Noah, shows how myths flowed across cultures, carried like rivers into new lands, reshaped but never erased. Gilgamesh, in the end, did not find immortality. Instead, he returned home, realizing that his true legacy lay not in escaping death but in the walls he built, the city he protected, the people he loved. His story reminds us that even the oldest myths echo with human longing for friendship, for meaning, for something that endures beyond the self. The Mesopotamians told other stories as well. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, the world was born from struggle. Tiamat, the great serpent of chaos, battled the younger gods, until Marduk, champion of order, defeated her. From her body, he shaped the heavens and the earth. Creation here was not gentle, but born of conflict. Yet from that conflict came structure, life, and stability. The myth reflects a world where floods and storms were constant, where order was always fragile, where people yearned for protection from chaos. The Sumerian goddess of love and war was also central in these myths. She descended into the underworld, passing through 7 gates, stripped of her power, facing death itself. Yet she returned, reborn, reminding people that life and death were part of a cycle, that descent could lead to renewal. Her story, like that of Persephone in Greece, is one of seasonal rhythm, of loss and return, of the eternal balance of shadow and light. From Mesopotamia, we move eastward, to ancient Persia, where Zoroastrianism emerged, one of the world's oldest enduring religions. Its myths shaped the understanding of good and evil, light and darkness, in ways that influenced later traditions. At its heart was the figure of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, opposed by Angra Mainyu, the spirit of destruction. The world, in Zoroastrian thought, was a battlefield between truth and falsehood, between order and chaos. Humanity was called to choose, to live in harmony with truth, to align with light. The Zoroastrian myths spoke of a cosmic struggle that would end not in endless conflict, but in renewal. At the end of time, a savior would come, evil would be destroyed, the dead would rise, and the world would be remade in purity. This vision of a final victory, of resurrection, of renewal, carried forward into later traditions, shaping Jewish thought, Christian hope, and Islamic teachings. The idea that history had a direction, that the world was moving toward a promised renewal, was one of Zoroastrianism's most enduring gifts. Now, let us move to the land of Canaan in Israel, where the stories of the Hebrew Bible were told and retold, becoming foundational for much of the world. These stories, though framed as history and revelation, carry within them echoes of older myths, reshaped for a new vision. In Genesis, the creation story tells of a world shaped not by conflict but by word. Let there be light, and there was light. Order was spoken into being. Yet even here, one sees the shadow of Mesopotamia, for the deep waters of chaos. The TM recall Tiamat. The flood story, too, echoes Utnapishtim's tale. But the Hebrew storytellers reshaped these myths, giving them new meaning. The flood was not the whim of quarreling gods, but the judgment of a single just God, who also showed mercy, preserving life through Noah's Ark. The story of Adam and Eve in the garden is also a myth of beginnings, of choice, of knowledge. It speaks gently of innocence, of temptation, of the longing to be like gods. It explains why life is hard, why death comes, yet also carries a sense of dignity, that humanity, though fallen, is made in the image of God. It is a myth both sorrowful and hopeful, showing that even in exile, meaning and destiny remain. The Hebrew myths are filled with journeys. Abraham leaving his homeland, called by a voice unseen. Moses leading his people through the desert, guided by fire and cloud. These are not myths of distant gods only, but of a God who walks with a people, who makes covenants, who promises land, blessing, and future. The mythic pattern here is one of relationship between the divine and humanity, between promise and fulfillment, between exile and return. These stories carried through time into Christianity, where the figure of Jesus became the central myth and truth, the one who embodied both humanity and divinity. His life, death, and resurrection echoed ancient patterns, the dying and rising God, the hero who descends into death and returns renewed. Yet here the story was given a new depth, for it was not only about seasonal cycles or cosmic struggles, but about love, sacrifice, and redemption for all. The myth of the resurrection is one of the most enduring of all time. Like Osiris in Egypt, like Inanna in Sumer, Jesus dies and rises, but this rising was proclaimed as real, historical, transformative, breaking the boundary between myth and faith. For billions, it became not only a story to tell, but a reality to live by, a hope that death itself would not be the end. Islam, too, carried forward the stream of story. The Quran speaks of prophets known from earlier traditions: Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, but reshaped within a vision of unity, of submission to the one God. The myths here are not merely retold, but woven into a tapestry that emphasizes continuity, connection, and fulfillment. The story of creation, of humanity's fall, of the flood, of prophetic guidance, all appear, yet framed within the certainty that history is guided, that revelation is clear, that the story points always toward God. Islamic tradition also holds rich mythic imagery. The night journey of the Prophet Muhammad, ascending through the heavens, meeting earlier prophets, beholding wonders, standing in the presence of God. This journey, both spiritual and cosmic, echoes earlier patterns of ascent, yet becomes something uniquely luminous, offering inspiration and devotion. In all these traditions, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, we see myths reshaped, yet never lost. Ancient patterns of creation, of flood, of descent and ascent, of sacrifice and renewal, all continue, living in new forms, carried into prayers, rituals, and sacred texts. The old becomes new, the myth becomes faith, yet always the story endures. As we drift through these lands, we feel the weight of time, yet also its lightness. The stories first spoken by shepherds and priests, carved on stone, sung in temple and synagogue, church and mosque, still live. They have shaped civilizations, guided billions, inspired art, music, poetry. They have given meaning to suffering, hope to the weary, vision to the searching. And so, from the rivers of Mesopotamia to the deserts of Arabia, from the temples of Babylon to the sacred city of Jerusalem, myths have never died. They flow onward, like rivers into the sea, always reshaping, always enduring. In the vast lands of East Asia, where mountains touch the clouds and rivers stretch endlessly across the earth, stories have lived for thousands of years. Here, myths are less about battles of gods and more about harmony, balance, and the delicate weaving together of heaven, earth, and humanity. The myths of China, Japan, and Korea are among the oldest still remembered, and they speak in soft tones of cycles, spirits, ancestors, and the eternal dance of order. In ancient China, myths were often framed by the rhythm of nature and the movements of the sky. One of the oldest tales tells of Pangu, the giant who was born from the cosmic egg. In the beginning, there was nothing but chaos, swirling and within that egg, Pangu grew for 18,000 years. When at last he broke free, his body pushed apart the heavens and the earth. His breath became the wind, his voice the thunder, his eyes the sun and moon. From his body came mountains, rivers, trees, and soil. And when he finally lay down to rest, his spirit lingered, shaping the world into harmony. This myth of Pangu is one of creation, not born from violence but from transformation, from the giving of oneself so that the world may exist. It mirrors the sense in Chinese thought that the universe is not divided by chaos and order but balanced, that life itself emerges from the great harmony of yin and yang, the complementary forces that flow through all things. Alongside Pangu, the myths of Nuwa, the mother goddess, tell of care and compassion. When the heavens were torn and floods raged, she mended the sky with stones of 5 colors, restoring balance. She also shaped humanity from clay, breathing life into the small figures she made with her hands. In this tender act, she became the archetype of the nurturing creator, a reminder that myths can speak not only of strength but of gentleness. Chinese mythology is filled with dragons, but unlike the fierce dragons of the West, these creatures are bringers of rain, symbols of power and wisdom, guardians of rivers and skies. They coil through the air, not as monsters but as protectors, embodying majesty and grace. For centuries, emperors were said to be descended from dragons, their rule justified by the mandate of heaven, a cosmic order that connected the harmony of the skies with the justice of the ruler. If floods or famines came, it was not merely misfortune but a sign that the balance had been broken, that the emperor had lost alignment with the cosmos. In these myths, one feels the deep connection between humanity and nature. To live well was to live in harmony with heaven and earth, with ancestors and spirits. The stories guided not only imagination but also ethics, politics, and daily life. Among the most famous Chinese tales is that of the Monkey King, Sun Wukong. From the classic Journey to the West, though a later story, it draws upon ancient mythic patterns. The Monkey King, born from stone, mischievous and bold, sought immortality, defied heaven, and learned great powers. Yet his arrogance led to his downfall, until he joined the monk Xuanzang on a pilgrimage, where through trials he found discipline, compassion, and growth. His story is playful, full of magic and wonder, yet also deeply symbolic of the restless spirit tamed through wisdom. Of the journey from chaos to harmony. In Japan, myths speak with a different cadence, yet carry similar themes of harmony and renewal. The Kojiki, one of Japan's oldest texts, preserves the creation story. At the beginning, heaven and earth were not yet separated. From the swirling chaos, deities emerged. Among them were Izanagi and Izanami, the divine pair who stirred the ocean with a jeweled spear, lifting the islands of Japan from the waters. They descended to the new land, shaping it, giving birth to gods of sea, fire, and nature. Their story, though gentle in the beginning, also carries sorrow. When Izanami died, giving birth to the fire god, Izanagi descended into the underworld to bring her back. There, he saw her transformed, a figure of decay, no longer the radiant goddess he had loved. Fleeing in grief, he purified himself in a river. From the washing of his eyes and nose came new deities: Amaterasu, the sun goddess, Tsukuyomi, the moon god, and Susanoo, the storm god. Of these, Amaterasu became the most revered. She was the shining light, source of warmth and order. Yet even she once hid herself in a cave, offended by her brother Susanoo's reckless behavior. The world fell into darkness until the other gods lured her out with laughter, dance, and a mirror that reflected her own brilliance. Her return restored light to the world, a reminder that even the sun may retreat, but will shine again. The myths of Japan are filled with kami, spirits that dwell in rivers, trees, rocks, and mountains. Every element of nature is alive, worthy of respect, part of the sacred. This Shinto vision gives the myths a gentleness, a reverence for the natural world, where even the smallest stream has its guardian. Even the oldest tree holds wisdom. The myths of the storm god tell of wildness tamed by courage. He once battled the great serpent, Yamato no Orochi, cutting off its heads one by one, and from its tail he drew forth a sacred sword, later treasured as one of Japan's imperial regalia. Here again we see the timeless motif of the hero slaying the serpent, yet in Japanese form, woven into their own sacred narrative. Across the sea in Korea, myths also speak of heavenly descent and earthly harmony. The founding myth of Dangan tells how a heavenly prince, Wonong, descended to earth, bringing order to humanity. A bear and a tiger longed to become human. The bear endured trials, eating only garlic and mugwort in a cave, and was transformed into a woman. She married Wonong, and their child, Dang, became the first king of Korea. This myth links heaven and earth, endurance and reward, showing how patience and harmony with the divine bring new beginnings. In East Asia, myths are not only about the distant past but about presence. Ancestors are remembered, spirits honored, the cycles of time respected. The lunar festivals, the dances of dragons and lions, the offerings at shrines, all carry forward the old stories, making myth part of daily life, even as Buddhism spread across China, Korea, and Japan, bringing new tales of Buddhist enlightenment and cosmic cycles. The older myths remained, blending with the new. The Buddha's stories of compassion joined the dragon dances. The teachings of impermanence harmonized with reverence for the eternal sun and moon. Myths did not disappear. They absorbed, transformed, and lived on. One feels in these traditions a profound calm. The myths of East Asia do not shout of apocalypse or thunder endlessly of war. Instead, they whisper of balance, of cycles, of light returning after darkness, of spirits dwelling in all things. They are lullabies of harmony, where even storms have their place, where even chaos can be turned to beauty. As we drift through these lands in imagination, one can almost hear the sound of flowing rivers, the rustling of bamboo, the call of cranes over distant mountains. The myths here are not only told, but felt in the landscape, in the wind, in the quiet stillness of dawn. They remind us that myth is not only about gods and heroes, but about living gently with the world, about seeing the sacred in what is near, about knowing that every breath is part of a larger harmony. In the lands of South Asia, where rivers flow like lifelines and mountains rise like the shoulders of the earth, myths have flourished for thousands upon thousands of years. Here, the sacred stories are vast, deep, and filled with a sense of timeless rhythm. Unlike myths that speak only of beginnings and endings, the myths of India often move in cycles. eternal turnings of creation and destruction, of gods and heroes, of time that has no single start and no final end. In the Vedic hymns, some of the earliest known to humanity, the world is sung into being. The Rig Veda speaks of the cosmic sacrifice, where Purusha, the primal being, was offered up, and from his body the world emerged. His mouth became the Brahmins, the priests, his arms became the warriors, his thighs the merchants, his feet the servants. From his body came the moon and the sun, the heavens and the earth. This vision of creation as sacrifice, as the giving of oneself for the whole, resonates deeply with the rhythms of Indian thought, where life and death are woven together in cycles of renewal. Another hymn speaks of the great waters, of the golden embryo, the hero floating on the cosmic sea, from which all life was born. This image, of life emerging from the waters, connects India to the oldest myths of the world, yet here it carries a gentle vision of birth, of light emerging softly from darkness. From the Vedic age grew the great epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, two of the longest and most profound stories ever told. These are not merely tales of war and kings, but oceans of myth, containing within them philosophy, poetry, devotion, and moral reflection. The Ramayana tells the story of Rama, the prince exiled to the forest, his faithful wife Sita, and his loyal companion Hanuman, the monkey god whose strength and devotion are legendary. The tale speaks of love, of loyalty, of the struggle between righteousness and desire. When Sita is taken by Ravana, the demon king, Rama journeys across forests and oceans, aided by Hanuman and an army of monkeys, to bring her back. Yet the story is not simply about battles. It is about duty, dharma, the responsibility to live rightly, even in hardship. Hanuman himself has become one of the most beloved figures of myth, not for his power alone, but for his humility and devotion. He tore open his chest to show that within his heart lived Rama and Sita, his love eternal. His story, recited in temples and homes across centuries, reminds listeners that true strength lies not in pride but in faith and service. The Mahabharata still tells of a great war between cousins, the Pandavas and the Kauravas for the throne of Hasta. Its story stretches across generations, filled with heroes, sages, and gods walking among men. Yet at its heart is the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord, where Krishna counsels Arjuna, who stands on the battlefield, torn between duty and sorrow. In soothing words, Krishna tells him that the soul is eternal, that death is not the end, that duty must be done without attachment. The Gita is both myth and philosophy, offering comfort to countless souls across the ages. In Hindu thought, time itself is mythic. The world passes through great cycles, Yugas, ages of gold and silver, bronze and iron, times of harmony and times of decline. Creation and destruction are endless, like the breathing of Brahma, the creator, whose day and night last billions of years. Vishnu, the preserver, descends again and again in different forms as fish, as tortoise, as boar, as man-lion, as Krishna and Rama, to restore balance when it is lost. Shiva, the destroyer, dances the Tandava, a cosmic dance that both ends and renews creation. Together, they show that destruction is not only an end but also a beginning, that the cycles of the cosmos mirror the cycles of human life. The myths of Hinduism are filled with color, with gods who are near yet vast, with stories that blend playfulness and depth. Krishna as a child steals butter, plays the flute, dances with the gopis, embodying joy and love. Yet he is also the divine teacher, the cosmic being who reveals himself as the universe itself. The myth of Krishna holds both laughter and awe, showing that the divine can be intimate and infinite at once. In the stories of Shiva, we see another side, the ascetic who meditates in the mountains, covered in ash, yet also the lord of dance, whose movements keep the universe alive. His consort, Parvati, and their children, Ganesha and Kartikeya, bring warmth and family to the cosmic myth, showing that even gods live in bonds of love. Ganesha, with his elephant head, is beloved as the remover of obstacles, his story gentle and humorous, a reminder that wisdom often wears unexpected forms. The myths of South Asia are not confined to Hinduism alone. In Buddhism, the stories of the Buddha's life are told again and again, not only as history but as myth. Born as Prince Siddhartha, he saw the suffering of the world and left his palace to seek the truth. Under the Bodhi tree, he meditated until enlightenment dawned, until he saw the world as it is impermanent, filled with suffering, yet also open to liberation through compassion and understanding. Buddhist myths tell of the Buddha's past lives, the Jataka tales, where he was born as animals, kings, sages, always learning, always growing, until he reached awakening. These stories are gentle, filled with lessons of kindness, patience, and selflessness. They are told not with thunder but with calm, teaching that the greatest hero is not the warrior but the one who frees others from suffering. In Mahayana Buddhism, bodhisattvas appear beings who could enter nirvana but choose to remain, helping all others. Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, is said to hear the cries of the world, appearing in countless forms to bring comfort. In China, Avalokiteshvara became known as Guanyin, the merciful mother, one of the most beloved figures in all of Asia. Here we see how myth transforms yet endures, reshaped across lands and centuries, always carrying the same gentle heart. Jainism, too, carries myths of eternity. It speaks of the Tirthankaras, enlightened beings who appear age after age, teaching the path of nonviolence, truth, and renunciation. Their stories emphasize that time is without beginning, without end, an eternal cycle where truth is always rediscovered. The myth here is not of gods ruling the world, but of souls finding liberation through discipline, reminding us that even in myth, silence and simplicity can hold great power. The myths of South Asia are not only told in texts but lived in festivals, dances, and songs. Each year, the story of Rama is enacted in the Ram Leela. Each year, Krishna's birth is celebrated with joy and play. The dance of Shiva is performed by countless dancers, the sound of drums echoing the rhythm of the cosmos. In every temple bell, in every offering of flowers, the myths are alive. What makes these stories eternal is their vastness. They do not end with a single victory or a final apocalypse. They turn like wheels, offering meaning to every stage of life. A child may find joy in Krishna's play. A warrior may find courage in Arjuna's battle. A seeker may find peace in the Buddha's silence. The myths embrace all, leaving no one outside their circle. As we drift with these stories, one feels a deep calm, as though listening to the flow of the Ganges, steady and timeless. The myths here do not rush. They unfold like the seasons, like the rising and setting of the sun. They remind us that life itself is a story, part of a larger cycle, never fully lost, never truly ending. Far to the north, where winter lingers long and the sky glows with shimmering curtains of green and violet light, myths were born of frost and fire, of endless nights and brief summers, of seas that roared and forests that stretched dark and deep. These are the lands of the Norse sagas, the Celtic tales, and the Slavic stories, each carrying echoes of humanity's longing to understand a world both beautiful and harsh. The Norse myths begin with a vision at once stark and grand. In the beginning, there was a yawning void Ginangop, where fire from Muspelheim met ice from Niflheim. From this meeting of opposites, life emerged. Ymir, the great frost giant, was born, and from him came the race of giants. The gods themselves arose from his body, and when they slew him, they shaped the world from his remains. His flesh became the land, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains, his skull the sky. Even his eyebrows formed the protective wall around Midgard. The world of men, this creation, born from sacrifice and transformation, has a raw power. The world is not crafted gently but carved from death, reminding us of the hard landscapes where these stories were told, where survival required strength, and where beauty was always edged with danger. The gods of the Norse myths, the Gyr, lived in Asgard, high above, connected to the world of men by the Rainbow Bridge. By Odin, the All-Father was their leader, a god of wisdom and war. He sacrificed an eye to drink from the well of knowledge, and he hung upon the world tree, Yggdrasil, pierced by a spear, to learn the secrets of runes. His quest was always for wisdom, for foresight, even if it cost him dearly. Thor, his son, was the Thunderer, strong and fierce, wielding the hammer. He protected gods and men from giants and monsters, his hammer striking like lightning across the sky. Yet he was not only a warrior but also a figure of warmth, beloved by common folk, who saw in him both strength and simplicity. Loki, the trickster, was ever shifting, clever, and dangerous. Sometimes he helped the gods, sometimes he harmed them, but always he stirred the story forward. He was both friend and enemy, embodying the chaos that lies within order, the unpredictability of life itself. The Norse myths are threaded with a deep awareness of fate. Even the gods are not immortal. They know that one day, Ragnarok will come. the twilight of the gods. The wolf, Fenrir, will break free. The serpent Jormungandr will rise from the sea. The sky will darken, and fire will consume the earth. Odin will fall. Thor will die fighting the serpent, and all will be undone. Yet from the ashes, a new world will rise, green and fresh, where survivors will live in peace. This cycle of destruction and renewal mirrors the harsh northern seasons, where winter can feel like an ending, yet spring always returns. It is a myth, both bleak and hopeful, a lullaby of endings that promise beginnings. The Celtic myths, woven across Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Gaul, carry a different rhythm. They are stories of warriors and druids, of kings and fairies, of a world where the natural and the supernatural constantly touch. In Celtic thought, the veil between worlds was thin, and the other world was never far away. The Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, were gods and heroes who came to Ireland in ships surrounded by mist. They brought magic, wisdom, and great treasures. Among them were Dogda, the good god, with his cauldron that never emptied, Loa, the shining one, master of all arts, and Brigid, goddess of poetry, healing, and they battled the Fomorians, dark and chaotic beings, and brought order and prosperity to the land. Yet eventually, they too faded, becoming the hidden people, the fair folk, the city, who dwelled beneath the hills. Their presence still felt in whispers of wind and flickering lights. The Celtic myths are rich with hero tales. The Ulster cycle tells of Suchulainn, the Hound of Ulster, who, as a boy, slew a mighty hound and took its place as guardian. Fierce in battle, yet tragic in fate, he defended his land with supernatural power. His Astrat, a battle frenzy that transformed him into something more than human. His story, like many Celtic tales, blends the heroic and the sorrowful, reminding listeners that glory often comes with sacrifice. The Mabinogion, the great Welsh collection of tales, tells of heroes and enchantments, of transformations and journeys. Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, trades places with Aron, king of the otherworld. Bran the Blessed carries his giant head across the sea. Rhiannon, a goddess-like figure, rides a horse none can catch, her story filled with both grace and suffering. These myths, lyrical and haunting, speak of cycles of joy and loss, of the closeness of the otherworld, of the deep magic within the land itself. In the Baltic and Slavic lands, myths also flourished, shaped by forests, rivers, and long winters. The Slavs told of Perun, the thunder god, wielder of lightning, who fought Veles, the serpent god of the underworld, in an eternal struggle of sky against earth, order against chaos. This battle, reflected in storms, was never fully won, always repeating, echoing the rhythm of the seasons. The Slavic world was filled with spirits, the Doma, household guardians who watched over homes, the Rusalka, water maidens who could be kind or dangerous, the Leshy, spirits of the forest, tricksters who led wanderers astray. These myths reveal a world where nature was alive, where every tree and stream held mystery, where living well meant honoring the unseen. In Lithuania and Latvia, the Baltic peoples sang Danas, short folk songs filled with mythic imagery. They spoke of Sol, the sun goddess, who rode her chariot across the sky, bringing warmth and light. Her daughter, the morning star, and her son, the moon, joined her in cycles of love and loss, reflecting the eternal dance of day and night. The myths here were sung, woven into daily life, carried in melodies that lingered softly on the lips of farmers, mothers, and children. What unites these European myths is their closeness to nature, their sense of cycles, their awareness of fate. Whether in the Norse vision of Ragnarok, the Celtic otherworld, or the Slavic battles of thunder and serpent, there is always the understanding that life is fragile, that endings come, but that renewal follows. As we rest within these stories, we can imagine sitting by a fire in a northern hall, snow falling outside, the sound of a bard's voice weaving tales, or we can picture a quiet glen in Ireland, mist rising from the grass, where the wind itself seems to carry the voices of the fair folk. These myths, though ancient, still breathe, carried in the land, in the songs, in the very air. They are not myths of distant, unreachable gods alone, but of gods and heroes who walk close to human lives, who share in struggle, who face fate with courage. They remind us that even in the darkest winters, the light returns, that even when worlds end, new worlds are born, that myths, like the earth itself, never truly die, but turn and turn again. Africa, vast and timeless, holds within its soil some of the oldest stories ever told. It is the cradle of humanity, where the first people walked, where voices rose around ancient fires, and where the rhythms of drum, dance, and tale carried knowledge from one generation to the next. Here, myths are not just legends of long ago, they are living echoes of the land itself, sung in lullabies, whispered in proverbs, carried in the call of birds and the flow of rivers dot along the Nile. In the heart of ancient Egypt, stories of gods and afterlives shaped an entire civilization. These were not merely myths to entertain, but guiding truths woven into temples, tombs, and rituals that spanned thousands of years. At the center stood Osiris, god of death and resurrection, whose story is one of the most enduring in human memory. Betrayed by his brother Set, dismembered and scattered across the land, Osiris was lovingly reassembled by his wife, Isis, whose magic and devotion brought him back to life. From Osiris came Horus, the falcon-headed god, who avenged his father and took his place as king of the gods. This myth, rich and solemn, spoke of cycles of death and renewal, of the Nile's yearly flooding, of crops dying and rising again. It gave comfort in the face of mortality, promising that death was not an end but a passage. The Egyptians built pyramids as ladders to the sky, painted tomb walls with guides for the soul's journey, and filled the air with hymns that echoed with this eternal faith. Their myth of death and rebirth is not lost. It lingers still in how we think of afterlife, of judgment, of resurrection. Yet Egypt was only one thread in Africa's mythic tapestry. Across the Sahara and into the savannas, stories lived in voices, not stone. The griots of West Africa, the keepers of oral history, preserved myths alongside genealogies and songs. One of the most celebrated tales is that of Anansi, the trickster spider of the Akan people, whose cleverness is sharper than the strength of kings. Anansi tricks the sky god into giving him the stories of the world. He fools powerful animals, he shifts shapes, he teaches that wit and laughter can overcome even great challenges. Anansi is more than a spider, he is resilience itself. A reminder that smallness is not weakness, that wisdom lies in cunning. His stories traveled across the Atlantic with enslaved Africans, becoming part of the folklore of the Caribbean and the Americas, proof that myths travel as surely as people, that they cannot be chained or silenced. Other myths tell of creation. The Dogon people of Mali speak of Amma, the sky god, who shaped the world, and of Namo, the first living beings, who brought water, speech, and order. Their stories connect earth and cosmos, weaving astronomy and spirit into a single fabric. Some Dogon myths even tell of Sirius, the star, with details that astonish modern scholars, as if the sky itself whispered secrets into ancient ears. In Yoruba tradition, creation begins with the supreme god Olodumare, who sent the Orisha Obatala down from the heavens, with a snail shell filled with sand, a rooster, and a palm nut. From these humble gifts, the earth was formed. The Orisha's divine beings guide human life. Shango, lord of thunder; Ocean, goddess of rivers and love; Ogun, master of iron and war. Each Orisha reflects forces of nature, blending human qualities with cosmic power, reminding us that the divine is woven into rivers, storms, and forests, as close as the breath we take. Traveling further, the myths of Central and Southern Africa speak of beginnings rooted in earth and sky. The Zulu tell of Unkulunku, the great ancestor, who emerged from a bed of reeds and gave life to humanity. From reeds and waters, life begins, simple, gentle, eternal. The Sand people, among the oldest storytellers on earth, share tales of the trickster, Kagan, the mantis, who shifts shapes, plays tricks, and teaches lessons through laughter and mishap. In one story, he steals fire. In another, he helps animals. In another, he causes chaos. Yet always, Kagan reflects the unpredictability of life, the humor hidden even in hardship. These myths do not stand apart from daily life. They are woven into it. A child hearing a tale of Anansi learns not only to laugh, but to think. A farmer listening to stories of Osiris understands the rhythm of planting and harvest. A traveler pausing by a fire hears of spirits in rivers and knows to respect the waters he drinks. Myths are not entertainment alone, but guidance, memory, compass. What is striking about Africa's myths is their endurance. Though empires rose and fell, though traders crossed deserts and seas, though colonization sought to silence voices, the myths lived on. They lived in griot songs, in drummers' rhythms, in mothers' bedtime stories, in whispered prayers to the Orishas, in ceremonies where ancestors are called by name. Even when written records were scarce, the stories never died, for they were inscribed not on stone but in the living memory of communities. And so, Africa reminds us of something vital, that myths are not fragile, that they do not vanish when libraries burn or cities fall. They survive in people, in language, in song. A myth carried in the heart is indestructible. Imagine now the sound of a drum, steady and low, beneath a sky filled with stars. A storyteller begins, children gather close, elders listen, the fire flickers, shadows dance. The story may be of gods, or of tricksters, or of ancestors, but what matters most is that it is shared. In that moment, time itself bends, and the living sit side by side with the dead, with those not yet born, bound together by words. Africa's myths are not lost, they flow like rivers, unbroken, carrying wisdom through centuries, reminding us that to tell a story is to keep the world alive. The vast continents of the Americas, stretching from icy Arctic to windswept Tierra del Fuego, hold within them a treasury of myths as varied as the landscapes themselves. From soaring mountains to dense rainforests, from deserts to plains, people looked to the world around them and heard voices in wind and river, saw patterns in stars and clouds, felt presences in animals and stone. Here, myths were not only stories but frameworks of life, woven into rituals, calendars, and memory. In Mesoamerica, the Maya built cities of stone, their pyramids rising like mountains crowned with temples. Their myths, preserved in works like the Popol Vuh, are profound, complex, and filled with cosmic vision. Creation, in their telling, was not achieved in a single act, but through trials and errors. The gods sought to make humans, first from mud, but they crumbled, then from wood, but they were brittle, hollow, without soul. Finally, humans were formed from maize, the sacred corn, their flesh from its dough, their blood from its water. For the Maya, maize was not just food but essence, the very substance of humanity. The Popol Vuh tells also of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Zabot, who descended into Xibalba, the underworld, to challenge the lords of death. Through wit, courage, and sacrifice, they triumphed, rising to the heavens as the sun and moon. Their story is one of transformation, of resilience, of victory over darkness, a myth that reflects both the struggles of life and the cycles of day and night, death and rebirth. Among the Aztecs, myths were fierce and luminous, reflecting a world where empire, ritual, and cosmos intertwined. They spoke of successive suns, ages of the world that rose and fell. We live, they said, in the fifth sun, created after the gods gathered in Teotihuacan to bring light once more. But this sun was not given freely. It required sacrifice. Nanahuatzin, the humble, leaped into fire, becoming the sun, while Tecusitecatl, proud and hesitant, became the moon. Yet the sun, though created, would not move until the other gods gave their lives. Thus the Aztec world was bound to sacrifice, not as cruelty, but as cosmic necessity, feeding the sun so it could journey across the sky. The feathered serpent was a god of creation, wisdom, and wind. He shaped humans from the bones of ancestors, giving them life with his blood. Yet he was also a figure of tragedy, betrayed and exiled, a god who left but promised to return. His story carried hope, longing, and the weight of cycles that turn endlessly, of gods and men bound in shared destiny. Southward, in the high Andes, the Inca Empire flourished, and with it, myths that connected earth and sky. They told of Viracocha, the great creator, who emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca to shape the sun, moon, stars, and the first people. When some disobeyed him, he turned them to stone, their forms still standing as Waka's sacred places in the landscape. Viracocha wandered the world, teaching, shaping, then vanished across the sea, promising one day to return. The Inca honored Inti, the sun god, source of warmth and order, and his consort Mamaquilla, the moon, gentle and protective. They saw in the heavens not only stars but dark shapes, constellations formed from shadows in the Milky Way, animals and spirits watching over life below. Their myths were reflected in terraces cut into mountains, in rituals aligned to in festivals where entire cities became living embodiments of cosmic harmony. Far to the north, across plains, forests, and coasts, countless Native American nations preserved myths through storytelling, each tale carrying memory of ancestors, animals, and spirits. Among the Iroquois, there is the story of Sky Woman, who fell from the heavens. Birds caught her, placing her on the back of a great turtle. Upon its shell, earth was formed, Turtle Island, the world we know. From her descendants came the nations, each bound to the land, each carrying the story of their origins. In the traditions of the plains, myths often speak of trickster figures. Coyote, most of all. Coyote is clever and foolish, brave and cowardly, selfish and generous. Through his mistakes and antics, he shapes the world, teaches lessons, and reminds listeners of the humor and unpredictability of life. He is a mirror, showing humanity its flaws and strengths with laughter. The Haida and Tlingit of the Pacific Northwest tell of Raven, another trickster and creator who brought light to the world. In one tale, he stole the sun, moon, and stars from a selfish chief who kept them hidden. Releasing them into the sky, Raven ensured that light would shine for all. His cunning gave humanity not only daylight, but also a lesson that wisdom and courage can free what is trapped. In the deserts of the Southwest, the Hopi and other Pueblo peoples carry myths of emergence, of people rising from underworlds into the world above. They speak of Kushina's spirit beings who bring rain, fertility, and guidance. Their stories are not only told, but danced, embodied in ceremonies that blend myth and daily life, ensuring the cycles of nature continue in harmony. Across the Arctic, the Inuit tell of Sedna, the sea goddess, who dwells in the depths. Her hair tangled with seals, whales, and fish, she provides food for hunters, but only when respected. Shamans journey in spirit, to comb her hair, to soothe her, to keep balance between humans and sea. Her myth reflects the fragility of survival in icy lands, where respect for nature is not choice, but necessity. What binds the myths of the Americas is their closeness to land, sky, and life. They are not distant abstractions, but living maps of rivers, mountains, animals, and stars. They teach respect, warn against arrogance, celebrate resilience, and remind that every being, from coyote to maize, from raven to condor, is part of one great web. These myths endured even through empires fell, peoples were scattered, colonizers sought to silence ancient voices. Yet the stories lived on. They were whispered in secret, disguised in festivals, carried in song and dance, remembered by elders and retold to children. Like maize, like the sun, like the turtle's shell, the myths proved resilient. They never died, and so we listen now, across time and distance, to voices that still echo. A Maya priest chanting beneath temple steps, an Aztec offering beneath a burning sun, an Inca elder pointing to constellations etched in dark sky, a grandmother on the plains, laughing as she tells of coyotes' tricks, a shaman in the Arctic, singing to Sedna beneath icy seas. Each voice is part of a chorus, ancient and unbroken, reminding us that story is life, and life is story. In the vast landscapes of Asia, where mountains touch the heavens and rivers run like veins across the land, myths grew as naturally as bamboo, as enduring as stone, and as delicate as falling blossoms. These stories, told for millennia, carry the breath of ancestors, the wisdom of dynasties, and the stillness of temples. They are myths of dragons and emperors, of spirits and sages, of lands where earth and heaven intertwine like threads in an endless tapestry. In China, one of the oldest continuous civilizations, myths shaped not only imagination but identity. The story of creation begins with chaos, a swirling darkness. From this void Pangu emerged, a giant who grew for 18,000 years. When he finally stretched his limbs, he separated sky from earth. His breath became the wind, his voice thunder, his eyes the sun and moon, his hair the stars, his blood the rivers. When he died, his body gave life to the world, echoing myths elsewhere yet distinct in its imagery. A being so immense that his very form became the cosmos. Another enduring figure is Nuwa, the goddess who shaped humanity from clay. She molded figures by hand, giving them breath. Some she crafted carefully, others she made quickly with a rope, shaking off drops of mud that became people of different stations. In one tale, when the sky cracked, she melted stones of 5 colors and patched the heavens, saving the world from ruin. Her myth is one of creation and restoration, of a mother's care for her fragile children. Chinese mythology is filled with dragons. Unlike the fierce beasts of Europe, here, dragons are wise, benevolent, and powerful, embodiments of water, rivers, and rain. They live in palaces beneath seas and lakes, bringing life to fields. The Yellow Emperor Huangdi, one of the great culture heroes, was said to ascend to heaven upon a dragon, symbol of harmony and authority. To this day, the dragon is not a monster to fear, but a guardian to honor, a symbol of luck, vitality, and imperial power. Journeying eastward, Japan's myths shimmer like reflections on water. Preserved in the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, they tell of the Shinto kami, the spirits who dwell in mountains, rivers, trees, and shrines. At the beginning, from chaos, appeared Izanagi and Izanami, the divine pair. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, they stirred the sea with a jeweled spear. From the drops that fell, islands formed, becoming Japan itself. Izanami gave birth to deities, but when she bore the fire god, she was fatally burned and descended to Yomi, the land of the dead. Izanagi, grieving, pursued her, but when he saw her decayed form, he fled, sealing the entrance. From his purification afterward, new deities were born among them. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, shining and radiant. She became the ancestor of emperors, her light essential to life. Yet even Amaterasu once withdrew from the world, hiding in a cave after a quarrel with her brother, plunging earth into darkness. The gods, desperate, held a festival outside the cave, laughing and dancing until curiosity drew her out. With mirrors and joy, they coaxed her back, restoring light. This myth, gentle and playful, reflects not only cycles of day and night, but the balance of community, of laughter as salvation. In Japan, too, there are dragons, tengu with wings, fox spirits called kitsune, and stories of loyalty and honor. Myths weave seamlessly into ritual, into shrine festivals, into seasonal observances, reminding that kami are near, not distant. To walk through a torii gate is to step into their presence, into a world both earthly and divine. In Korea, myths speak of Tangan, the legendary founder. A bear and a tiger wished to become human. They prayed to Wanong, son of the heavenly god. He told them to stay in a cave, eating only garlic and mugwort for 100 days. The tiger gave up, but the bear endured, becoming a woman. She married Wanong and bore Tangan, who established the first kingdom, Gaju. This tale blends discipline, transformation, and the sanctity of endurance. Korean myths often emphasize harmony between heaven and earth, the role of ancestors, and the moral guidance of spirits. They are quiet, dignified, reflective of a culture that honors both struggle and patience, both resilience and gentleness. In Southeast Asia, myths bloom like orchids, colorful and diverse. In Vietnam, there is the story of LCC Long Quan, the dragon lord of the sea, who married UC, a fairy from the mountains. She bore 100 children, but the couple parted, each taking half to sea and mountains. From these children came the Vietnamese people, children of both dragon and fairy, of water and land, forever bound to both realms. In Cambodia, myths of the Khmer people tell of the Naga, serpent beings of the waters. A legend speaks of a marriage between an Indian Brahmin and a Naga princess, symbolizing the union of worlds. From their descendants came the Khmer kings, linking myth to sovereignty. The Naga, coiled in carvings at Angkor, remind all who see them of that ancient bond. In Indonesia and the Philippines, myths are countless, shaped by islands and seas. Some tell of great birds that carried the sky, of giants who shaped mountains, of ancestral spirits who still dwell in forests. The Bolognese speak of Rungda, the demon queen, and Barong, the protective lion-like spirit, whose eternal dance symbolizes balance between dark and light. In the Philippines, Bathala, the supreme deity, created the world, while other spirits of sky and sea guided daily life. Across Asia, what connects these myths is not only their richness but their nearness. Gods and spirits are not far away in unreachable heavens. They walk beside rivers, dwell in caves, ride the wind, live in homes, inhabit animals and mountains. They are part of daily existence, as close as rain, as near as the sound of a bell. And always, these myths endure. Dynasties rise and fall, temples crumble, empires vanish, yet the stories remain. They are told at New Year festivals, whispered at shrines, carried in lullabies, written in scrolls, painted on silk. They remind each generation of origins, of cycles, of the unseen forces that shape life. Imagine standing before a quiet shrine, lanterns glowing softly in the dusk. A breeze moves through pine trees. Somewhere, a storyteller begins, voice slow and steady. The tale may be of Pangu's giant form, or Amaterasu's radiant return, or a dragon rising from water. As the voice continues, the world feels larger, more mysterious, yet also more intimate, more whole. These myths, like the rivers of Asia, continue to flow, winding through time, nourishing memory, ensuring that even in the busiest modern cities, the voices of gods and ancestors are never far away. The Pacific Ocean stretches wider than any land, a vast blue expanse dotted with islands, atolls, and volcanic peaks rising from the deep. For those who call these islands home, the sea is not emptiness but a living highway, a place filled with spirits, ancestors, and stories. To live in Oceania is to live with the ocean, to read its swells as words, to follow its stars as maps, to hear in its winds the voices of gods and heroes. Among the most enduring figures is Māui, the trickster hero of Polynesian myth. His stories are told across Hawaii, New Zealand, Tahiti, Tonga, Samoa, and beyond, each island shaping his adventures in its own way. Yet always, Māui is bold, clever, mischievous, and transformative. One tale tells how Māui slowed the sun. In those days, the sun sped too quickly across the sky, leaving little time for work or play. People suffered, unable to fish or plant. Māui, with cunning and strength, snared the sun with ropes, demanding it move more slowly. The sun relented, and the days grew long. With this act, Māui gave humanity time itself, a gift still felt in every sunrise and sunset. Another tale tells how Māui fished up islands. Casting his magical hook into the sea, he pulled with all his might, raising land from the depths. The islands where people live today, lush and fertile, are his catch. To sail among them is to move through his legacy, to step on his gift. Yet Māui, like many trickster figures, knew both triumph and tragedy. In one story, he sought immortality for humankind, attempting to enter the goddess of death and reverse her cycle. But he failed, and death remained part of the human lot. His myth, playful yet poignant, reflects the balance of boldness and limit, of human striving and acceptance. In Hawaii, myths tell of Pele, goddess of volcanoes and fire, passionate and fierce. She dwells in Klauia, her lava flows shaping the land. She creates and destroys, burns and renews. To the people, she is both dangerous and generous, feared and revered. Stories of her eruptions, her wanderings, her battles with her sister Nomaka, goddess of the sea, echoed the raw power of islands born of fire and surrounded by ocean. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Milbori tell of Rangi, the Sky Father, and Papatranuku, the Earth Mother, locked together in a tight embrace. Their children, gods of forests, seas, winds, and war, struggled in darkness until they forced their parents apart, creating the world of light. Yet their separation filled earth and sky with longing, their tears becoming rain and mist. This myth speaks tenderly of creation as both birth and sorrow, of a world shaped by love as much as struggle. In Samoa, myths tell of Tagaloa, the creator, who fashioned the islands and people. In Tonga, stories speak of Tangaloa and Haikaleo, deities who governed land, sea, and the underworld. Across Tahiti, the god Tarawa is said to have lived within a shell, breaking it to form the heavens, earth, and all creatures. These myths, though varied, share a vision of creation as emergence, as unfolding, as rhythm echoing waves against shore. The peoples of Micronesia, dwelling on small atolls, tell of navigators guided by spirits. Stars became ancestors' eyes, swells became paths. Myths speak of culture heroes who taught the ways of canoe building, of voyages across endless seas. For them, myth and navigation were inseparable, ensuring survival and connection across thousands of miles. In Melanesia, the myths often blend ancestors with natural forces. Spirits dwell in stones, rivers, and trees. Some tales tell of the first people emerging from underworld caverns or from the mouths of animals. Others recount great floods, fires, or transformations, explaining landscapes with sacred stories. Myths here are intimately tied to place. A rock is not just a rock, but a marker of a god's deed, a witness of ancestral presence. What binds these Pacific myths is their relationship with the ocean. The sea is not barrier but bridge, not emptiness but fullness. It provides, threatens, guides, and remembers. Myths teach how to live with its power, how to honor it, how to see it not as something apart from humanity, but as kin, alive with spirits. And myths remain alive in song and dance. The hula of Hawaii, the hoka of Aotearoa, the chants of Tahiti, all carry myths within movement, rhythm, gesture. Stories are not only told but embodied, lived in community, remembered in the body as much as in words. Imagine sitting on a beach at dusk. Waves lap gently. Stars appear, one by one, until the Milky Way stretches like a canoe across the sky. A storyteller begins. He tells of Māui slowing the sun, of Peel shaping land with fire, of Ranginui and Papatoranuk weeping for each other. The ocean becomes a listener, carrying the words across water, from island to island, ensuring they never fade. These myths are not relics. They guide modern navigators who still sail without instruments, using stars as maps. They shape rituals in temples and dances on stages. They whisper in the wind moving through palms, in the rumble of volcanoes, in the spray of waves. They remind us that to live is to journey, that to journey is to remember, that myths, like oceans, never end. They only move, swell, and return. The Pacific Ocean stretches wider than any land, a vast blue expanse dotted with islands, atolls, and volcanic peaks rising from the deep. For those who call these islands home, the sea is not emptiness but a living highway, a place filled with spirits, ancestors, and stories. To live in Oceania is to live with the ocean, to read its swells as words, to follow its stars as maps, to hear in its winds the voices of gods and heroes. Among the most enduring figures is Māui, the trickster hero of Polynesian myth. His stories are told across Hawaii, New Zealand, Tahiti, Tonga, Samoa, and beyond, each island shaping his adventures in its own way. Yet always, Māui is bold, clever, mischievous, and transformative. One tale tells how Māui slowed the sun. In those days, the sun sped too quickly across the sky, leaving little time for work or play. People suffered, unable to fish or plant. Māui, with cunning and strength, snared the sun with ropes, demanding it move more slowly. The sun relented, and the days grew long. With this act, Māui gave humanity time itself, a gift still felt in every sunrise and sunset. Another tale tells how Māui fished up islands. Casting his magical hook into the sea, he pulled with all his might, raising land from the depths. The islands where people live today, lush and fertile, are his catch. To sail among them is to move through his legacy, to step on his gift. Yet Māui, like many trickster figures, knew both triumph and tragedy. In one story, he sought immortality for humankind, attempting to enter the goddess of death and reverse her cycle. But he failed, and death remained part of the human lot. His myth, playful yet poignant, reflects the balance of boldness and limit, of human striving and acceptance. In Hawaii, myths tell of Peel, goddess of volcanoes and fire, passionate and fierce. She dwells in Klauia, her lava flows shaping the land. She creates and destroys, burns and renews. To the people, she is both dangerous and generous, feared and revered. Stories of her eruptions, her wanderings, her battles with her sister Nomaka, goddess of the sea, echoed the raw power of islands born of fire and surrounded by ocean. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Milbori tell of Rangi, the Sky Father, and Papatoranuk, the Earth Mother, locked together in a tight embrace. Their children, gods of forests, seas, winds, and war, struggled in darkness until they forced their parents apart, creating the world of light. Yet their separation filled earth and sky with longing, their tears becoming rain and mist. This myth speaks tenderly of creation as both birth and sorrow, of a world shaped by love as much as struggle. In Samoa, myths tell of Tagaloa, the creator, who fashioned the islands and people. In Tonga, stories speak of Tangaloa and Haikaleo, deities who governed land, sea, and the underworld. Across Tahiti, the god Tarawa is said to have lived within a shell, breaking it to form the heavens, earth, and all creatures. These myths, though varied, share a vision of creation as emergence, as unfolding, as rhythm echoing waves against shore. The peoples of Micronesia, dwelling on small atolls, tell of navigators guided by spirits. Stars became ancestors' eyes, swells became paths. Myths speak of culture heroes who taught the ways of canoe building, of voyages across endless seas. For them, myth and navigation were inseparable, ensuring survival and connection across thousands of miles. In Melanesia, the myths often blend ancestors with natural forces. Spirits dwell in stones, rivers, and trees. Some tales tell of the first people emerging from underworld caverns or from the mouths of animals. Others recount great floods, fires, or transformations, explaining landscapes with sacred stories. Myths here are intimately tied to place. A rock is not just a rock, but a marker of a god's deed, a witness of ancestral presence. What binds these Pacific myths is their relationship with the ocean. The sea is not barrier but bridge, not emptiness but fullness. It provides, threatens, guides, and remembers. Myths teach how to live with its power, how to honor it, how to see it not as something apart from humanity, but as kin, alive with spirits. And myths remain alive in song and dance. The hula of Hawaii, the haka of Aotearoa, the chants of Tahiti, all carry myths within movement, rhythm, gesture. Stories are not only told but embodied, lived in community, remembered in the body as much as in words. Imagine sitting on a beach at dusk. Waves lap gently. Stars appear, one by one, until the Milky Way stretches like a canoe across the sky. A storyteller begins. He tells of Māui slowing the sun, of Peel shaping land with fire, of Ranginui and Papatoranuk weeping for each other. The ocean becomes a listener, carrying the words across water, from island to island, ensuring they never fade. These myths are not relics. They guide modern navigators who still sail without instruments, using stars as maps. They shape rituals in temples and dances on stages. They whisper in the wind moving through palms, in the rumble of volcanoes, in the spray of waves. They remind us that to live is to journey, that to journey is to remember, that myths, like oceans, never end. They only move, swell, and return. Since the first fires were lit in caves, and the first stories painted on stone, humanity has carried myths as companions. Across continents and centuries, we have seen how myths rose from rivers and deserts, from mountains and seas, from forests and stars. They were never just stories. They were explanations, guides, dreams, warnings, and comforts. They were ways to make sense of storms, of love, of death, of the great mysteries that circle our lives. And though civilizations changed, though empires rose and fell, though languages shifted and temples crumbled, these myths remained. They reshaped themselves like water poured into new vessels, but their essence never faded. Think of Mesopotamia, where Gilgamesh searched for immortality, and where flood myths echoed humanity's struggle against nature. Think of Egypt, where Osiris promised rebirth, and where Isis gathered the pieces of her beloved with patience and devotion. Think of Greece, where gods walked among mortals, where Zeus thundered, where Persephone's descent explained the seasons. Think of India, where Krishna danced and Rama upheld duty, where the Mahabharata and Ramayana stretched across ages like eternal rivers of wisdom. Think of the Norse, where Odin sought knowledge, where Thor defended, where Ragnarok loomed like a reminder of cycles ending and beginning again. Across oceans, in the Americas, we saw myths of creation and renewal. Quetzalcoatl bringing corn, the Inca tying their world to the sun, the Hopi guiding people through cycles of emergence. In Africa, we heard of Anansi spinning webs of cleverness, of ancestors shaping land and teaching survival, of myths that danced in rhythm with drums under wide skies. In China, Nuwa mended the heavens, Pangu split chaos into order, the Monkey King leapt across heaven with mischievous boldness. In Japan, Amaterasu brought light after retreating into her cave, reminding us that even the brightest radiance can hide, and must be invited back with joy and song. In Oceania, Māui slowed the sun and raised islands, Peel shaped land with fire. Navigators read myths in stars and swells, carrying memory across waters as wide as eternity. Each myth has its own face, its own sound, its own landscape. Yet, beneath their differences, they share something profound. They speak of origins, of journeys, of loss, of rebirth. They wrestle with time, with mortality, with the unseen. They imagine powers greater than ourselves, yet reflect our own hopes and fears back to us. They are mirrors and lanterns. They remind us we are small, and yet, that our stories matter. And though today we live with science, with technology, with explanations that early storytellers never imagined, myths still live within us. We tell them in new forms in novels and films, in paintings and music, in whispered prayers and quiet dreams. We return to them because they carry more than explanation. They carry meaning. They carry connection. They carry the timeless rhythm of being human. The myths never died because they are not bound to time. They live in the turning of seasons, in the phases of the moon, in the tides of the sea, in the birth of children, in the passing of elders, in the endless search for love and knowledge. They live in us because we, too, are storytellers. As long as we wonder, as long as we speak, as long as we dream, myths will rise again. So now, as we close this long journey, imagine yourself beneath a quiet sky. Perhaps it is Mesopotamia's starlit desert. Perhaps it is Egypt's Nile under moonlight. Perhaps it is a forest in Europe, a steppe in Mongolia, a mountain in the Andes, an island in the Pacific. Wherever you are, look up. The stars above are the same stars that guided navigators, that inspired gods and heroes, that sparked the first stories told around fires. The wind that brushes your face has carried countless voices before it. The earth beneath you has heard every tale, every prayer, every song. The myths that never died are with you even now. In your breath, in your heartbeat, in the silence around you, they whisper softly. They ask nothing but to be remembered, to be carried forward, to be told again in new ways. And as you drift into rest, they remain, like guardians at the edge of sleep, timeless companions walking beside you through the dream-world. Close your eyes. The world becomes quiet. The stories settle like gentle waves. You are part of them now, and they are part of you. Myths do not end. They live on, in every dawn, in every dusk, in every moment between. Rest now, with the eternal stories of humanity cradling you. For myths, like dreams, never truly die. They wait, patient and alive, ready to rise again when the world is ready to listen.